Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Good afternoon, councillors, members of the public. Welcome along, staff. I declare this meeting open. I acknowledge the presence of the Honourable Adele Farina, MLC. Welcome to you, Adele. Under announcements, councillors, last week the first meeting of the Early Childhood Strategy proposal was held, and Ms Addison Brown is going to drive that project, so thank you very much for that. Also advised that yesterday we received a petition for a special electors meeting. Our officers are going through that petition to ensure compliance, and we'll deal with that administratively. Under apologies, we have Councillor McGuinness and Councillor Warnock are both apologies for tonight, notwithstanding Councillor Warnock has requested participation by phone, but I'll explain that in a second. Councillor Jones is on approved leave of absence. Councillor Warnock is on the East Coast, and strangely enough, if you're out of the state, you can't participate, which is really bizarre, but never mind. That's the law. Declarations of interest. I have two. Councillor Morris declares an impartiality interest with respect to item 10.1.3 as is known to the applicants. And Councillor Steck declares a financial interest with respect to item 10.4.1. Are there any further declarations of interest, councillors? We have no questions. Confirmation of the previous minutes. Councillor Cook, Councillor Giles, all in favour? It's carried unanimously, thank you. There are a number of advisory committees and working project groups. Can someone move that on mass 1 to 4, please? Councillor Giles, Councillor McCleary, all in favour? That's carried unanimously, thank you. Are there any petitions, councillors? We have requests, a number of requests for presentations tonight, deputations. John and Lynn Redding wish to do a presentation with respect to item 10.1.3. Those who support that, please indicate. That's approved. Planning Solutions wish to present on item 10.4.1. Those who approve, please indicate. It's approved. We have one from Sarko and Yunros Faso with respect to item 10.4.4. They're not here yet, but we'll ask if you approve that. They might rock up late. That's approved. Kim Wilkie, Vice President Boating Western Australia, wishes to present on item 10.5.1. Those who approve, that's approved. Mr Seymour wishes to speak on the same topic. Those who agree, that's approved. Mr Pearson Tierney, 10.51, same project, all agreement, it's approved. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, when we get to the items, I'll invite you to come forward. You speak for 5 minutes, and there is a clock in front of me which will help you with your timing. 8.4.1, someone prepared to move that recommendation to receive the report? Councillor Cook, Councillor Hayward, all in favour? It's carried, thank you. So, councillors, dealing with tonight's agenda, coming out for discussion 10.11, 10.13, 10.41, 10.44, 10.51. Are there any other items that anyone wishes to debate? Can someone move the balance, please? Councillor Hayward, Councillor Cook, all in favour? That's approved unanimously, thank you. So 10.11, councillors, we have, I'm seeking a move of the executive recommendation. Councillor McCleary, seconder. Councillor Cook. Anyone wish to debate this? I'll put it all in favour. It's carried unanimously, thank you. We Move to 10.13. John and Lynn Redding, are you in the audience? John? Welcome along. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. My wife Lynn and I are here tonight to support the executive recommendation to demolish the dwelling number 32 Austral Parade. Lynn and I have lived in the building for the last 17 years. When we bought the building, we believed it to be fully restored. Unfortunately, that didn't prove to be the case, and in the last 17 years it's gone from a considerably different building to what it is today. During that time, the building, there's been an awful lot of work done on it from us, and the building itself has fallen into a bad state of disrepair. In the time that we've been there, we've had structural engineers come through, builders, to look at the building, to give us advice on what to do. This all started while we were doing renovations and discovered that the problem that we were trying to repair was caused by a whole different scenario, which was the foundations of the building. Foundations in the report from the WML engineering suggest that the foundations need to be replaced, which is exceptionally difficult in a building that is made from double brick and from 130 years ago. The foundations have been flooded twice, and the mortar between the bricks has turned to sand and is falling out. Many of the bricks are loose. Much of the foundation is bowing and bending from the weight of the building on top of it, and we're left with a decision as to what to do. Unfortunately, after doing some costing and getting a builder through to do the costing, we found it impossible in our financial situation to be able to repair the building. After much deliberation, much discussion, our decision was to take the building down, to demolish the building, or apply to have the building demolished, to be able to subdivide the block, use the finances to build a Federation-style cottage so that we can get on with our lives in a positive manner. This is a very tough decision for us to make. We didn't intend for this to happen. We bought the building to live in for the remainder of our years and to enjoy that heritage environment. Unfortunately, it's not something that we can do. So we have applied to the council for permission to demolish, and with the people that have been to the building, seen the damage, and supported our recommendation, we believe that it's something that needs to be done. At the present time, we are moving out of the building because of the problems with the rising damp. We have black mould through the building. We have no ceilings in some parts. I'm sorry. We've been living in that sort of situation for the last 3 years, and it's become intolerable for us to stay there. So we are moving out, and unfortunately that's the way things have to be. At our stage in life, it's a very difficult decision to do, but it's the only one that we can do that we remain safe. And so we call upon the council to make a decision for us, or to assist in the decision-making process for us to be able to move on with our lives. I thank you for that time.
Thanks, John. Councillors, there is a executive recommendation and a committee recommendation. I'm prepared to accept and move on the executive recommendation. Councillor Steck, is there a seconder? Councillor Morris. Councillor Steck.
Sir, I think it's all been fully explained in the report, and also from the judge, and I just urge councillors to support the motion of your council executive.
Councillor Morris, do you wish to speak?
Yes. Actually, John and Lynn have asked me to go through their house, and taking a look at the situation, I'm surprised the council hasn't condemned the building long before. The damp actually has gone up through the walls, in which it's black mold all the way to the ceiling. Much of the house has to be actually closed off. The weight of the house bending and the roof collapsing as well has forced the walls coming out to the point which they can't even open up the windows because it's bending. A piece of cornice actually dropped from the ceiling onto a couch And if either Mr. or Mrs. Redding were sitting on the couch, they would have been dead now. So what we're asking is for them not to have to spend $500,000 or $600,000 just making the house structurally sound. That's going to take almost their entire superannuation and their retirement just to be able to restore a building. So we ask just common sense, allow the executive recommendation to take place and the demolition of the house. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a speaker against? Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, with heavy heart after hearing that, it makes it very difficult for me. However, I will be voting against the officer recommendation, and I have prepared an alternate motion for presentation should this one fail. Basically, I'm adding an A to the officer recommendation, so still resolving to grant approval for demolition, but A would read the original fascia of the property to be restored and retained as part of any new development. Councillors, Bunbury's got a very checkered history when it comes to retention of historic buildings, and it is unfortunately time we drew a line in the sand. If a building is deemed good enough to be on our local heritage listing and our own heritage committee recommends retention, we're duty bound to take that advice and act accordingly. I accept the arguments the building is too far gone to be fully saved, but it is my lay view that the fascia can be saved. Mr. Mayor, councillors, I urge you to vote against this particular motion and support my alternate motion should it arise. Thank you.
Speaker 4. Councillor Hayward.
I'd urge council to support this. The reality is this building's falling down. It's caused the owners a lot of grief and heartache, as we've heard tonight. The reality is that old buildings sometimes do get into this state. It's not had a chance to be on the state register, it's not. And it is our responsibility to manage that register. And in this circumstance, I think it's quite clear that these people need to move on. It's unfortunate. Nobody wants to see the building lost, but the reality is it's been lost due to just to the fact that it's falling apart. So I just urge councillors to support it. Thank you.
Further speaker against? Councillor Stick. I'll put it all in favour. Those against? 3 against, that's carried. So approval's been granted, Mr. and Mrs. Redding. Thanks, Councillor Stick. 10.41. Mr. Underwood, you know the rules of engagement. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors. I've come down here tonight on this fairly drizzly day and through a fair bit of weather conditions just to get here, and I think it's important for me to tell you why I've done that. I think it's quite important for council to understand the background to this and also the benefits that this proposal will bring, and not in any substantial way, but certainly in a measurable way in this particular area. This proposal is to rezone a drain which is being acquired by our client in order to redevelop as part of the properties next door to it. The drain's just off Strickland Street near Denning Road. Perhaps the take-home messages in the benefits towards this proposal, there's 3 of them that I'll go through, and there's many more beyond that. Perhaps the main one, council benefits financially from this proposal. It is the purchase of council-owned land by our client, and it's also, there's that original financial benefit through that process. There's also the ongoing rateable benefit that will be derived on an annual basis should this proceed. Secondly, it will encourage the redevelopment of these properties, and in doing so there'll be investment brought in, there'll be attraction brought into this area at the corner of Denning Road and Strickland Street. It will rejuvenate the areas, and there'll also be some jobs created through the construction process as all this goes through. finally, I've been out there. It is a drain, an open drain. It's unfenced, and in my view, it would be terrible to see some kind of accident if anyone were to, say, fall in there. Through this process, the drain will be acquired, it will be piped over, there will be completely removing that quite unsafe element, an unsecured drain at the moment. So, look, in short, this is a proposal that's been ongoing through negotiations with Council and our client for about 9 months now, and beyond. I think it's quite straightforward in my point of view. There are several benefits to be gained from this, and I hope to gain Council's support for this. I'd like to make the comment that we'll be continuing to engage with the officers and the administration through the process, and I look forward to continuing the engagement and coming down and having further discussions as we go on with this. So I do thank you for the time.
Thanks,
for
Ross.
hearing this. Thank you.
So I'm prepared to move the executive recommendation. Councillor Hayward, is there a seconder? Councillor Cook. Is there likely to be any debate? I'll put it all in favour. That's carried unanimously, thank you. That's approved. Just ask if Mr. or Mrs. Farso have arrived. They haven't. We move to 10.44, councillors. Can I have someone move the executive recommendation? Councillor Giles? Sure.
Thank you. I was approached by a couple of ratepayers today from Glen Iris who raised some concerns about the traffic. So I'd like to ask the officers, what is the long-term, do we have any long-term plans for Victoria Street that would make it safer for developments like this?
Yeah, I think, Councillor Giles, the report does include comments from our traffic engineers, but perhaps I'll, through the acting CEO, direct a question to Mr. Harris about putting on a vision hat, Mr. Harris, as to what's going to happen, particularly with South Moreland's development down the in the future, and what impact that might have on Victoria Road.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The long-term plans will be that road will be required to be upgraded, and obviously as subdivision develops in that area, those upgrading requirements become more apparent. So as traffic volumes increase on the roads, as developments go in, there's generally a requirement of those developments to contribute to the cost of upgrading those roads as well as leading roads into subdivisions. So I suppose it's been identified, it's in the future planning, if you like, in regards to the upgrade of that whole area there.
Yeah, I think you got a follow-up question, Councillor Giles? No. Question, Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Only, will it be widened? Will Victoria Road be widened, for instance, have a two-lane along that way?
Mr. Acting CEO, do you have a response to that, or put it through Mr. Harris?
Just through you, Mr. Mayor. The item on the agenda on page 65 indicates that ultimately it's to be upgraded to a two-lane carriageway, two-lane divided carriageway.
Councillor Giles, you wish to move?
I'd like to move the motion.
Seconder, please. Councillor Cook. Councillor Giles.
You know that for a long time I've been an advocate for facilities at Glen Iris, including footpaths, but I think this is a step forward. It's unfortunate it's on Victoria Street Road, but nonetheless it is something else for Glen Iris, and I think that's a really good move. So having allayed my concerns about the traffic, I'm very happy to support this motion and hope that the others do too. Thank you.
Councillor Cook. Speaker against? I'll put it all in favour. That's carried unanimously, thank you. Sorry, one you're voting against? One against, thanks Jamie. (10.5.1). So, Mr. Wilkie, are you present? So you have 5 minutes, Mr. Wilkie. Welcome.
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, councillors and staff, Boating West Australia is the peak body representing the interests of recreational boating community in Western Australia. We also sit on the advisory panel for the Department of Transport's Recreational Boating Facilities Scheme, assessing applications from across the state for recreational boating infrastructure. For the last 9 years, my background, last 9 years I served on the committee of the Swan Yacht Club in East Fremantle and I'm past Commodore of that organisation. I'm currently the Vice President of Boating Western Australia. I served as a councillor in the City of South Perth for 5.5 years and as a federal member for Swan for 9 years. Council originally made the decision not to raise the height of the Kambana Rail footbridge, believing this was the correct course of action. It's the opinion of Boating Western Australia that this decision was based on flawed information and then a lack of stakeholder consultation. We believe the correct course of action is to raise the height of the bridge to that of the road bridge. This will benefit the 6,500 registered boat users in Bunbury region and those who visit from other areas. BWA has addressed many of the concerns raised in the original officer's report in previous correspondence, but there's a few additional points I'd like to make. Council's original report listed the number one issue for the working party established to make recommendations to Council was the need to raise the footbridge to allow better access by the boating community. This has been misrepresented to suggest that this will attract larger boats into the inlet. Initially, in our response to the officer's report, we accepted this suggestion. Having visited the site and noted the height of the road bridge and the width of the storm surge barrier, it should be noted that this suggestion is unfounded. The height, even if raised, will not allow bigger boats to enter. Raising the height will merely allow for existing users entry in nearly all tidal conditions where they will not damage antennas, fishing rods and navigation aids. If the height of the bridge remains at 2 metres, some who use the inlet and plug on a regular basis are aware of the restrictions and will make allowances to mitigate damage. However, the fact is that many members of the public will not know of the dangers until they arrive at the bridge. In the case of sea search and rescue, the procedures undertaken to lower the equipment would take time and reduce efficiency in attending emergency situations. The inlet is currently used extensively by the recreational boating community. In Council's submission for funding for the Sykes Foreshore Project boat ramp and jetties in rounds 17 and 18 of the Recreational Boating Facilities Scheme, it suggested that this site alone caters for some 10,500 movements per year. Add to this the movements from the Stirling Street ramp, which has also been upgraded, and you'll see a dramatic use by recreational boaters. Council in fact received almost $650,000 in funding, which was 75% of the project costs for upgrading these facilities, but is not providing a safe passage for boats entering and exiting the ocean. Council report talks of Working Party not making a resolution regarding the height of the bridge and states that this is why the matter was referred to Council. However, the report and previous report acknowledged that the lack of bridge height was repeatedly raised. It would be fair to assume that there was general consensus that the bridge would be raised. The only question was by how much. What I find disturbing is that in the reports are recognised on page 5, that whilst the Bunbury Yacht Club's late submission was received, it was not included in the process, despite them being a major stakeholder and most affected by the decision. This was compounded by their not being advised of the timing of the meeting to decide the issue and that they could actually attend and make a deputation. Conflicting use. Whilst we acknowledge that there is a concern regarding the potential for conflict between powerboats and passive users of the inlet, the suggestion that raising the bridge will add to this is dramatically overstated. As outlined in our correspondence, the potential for conflict can be addressed by having a shared aquatic use review to manage these issues. As pointed out in our correspondence, the Swan Yacht Club hosts many forms of passive water-based groups, with many with well-developed junior programs. These include Fremantle Swan Dragon Boat Club, Stand-Up Paddleboard Association in Western Australia, Outrigger Canoe Club, TS Perth Naval Cadets, and we have a strong relationship with the East Fremantle Yacht Rowing Club. All groups enjoy a very healthy and positive relationship. The suggestion that might be a move to Casuarina Boat Harbour, but stage 3 has been announced, but the funding is still subject to a business case and the actual work is some years off. Having reviewed the plans, I note that there's a lot of work to be undertaken there for larger boats, but in terms of smaller boats, the boat ramp's only been increased by 2 additional bays. There's currently 8 bays in the inlet. The state government has limited funds. The Recreational Boating Facility Scheme had around $4 million per year in previous rounds, but this is now being reduced to 1.5. $750,000 for metro area, $750,000 for the rest of the state. I note Council's minutes of July 26, 16, page 38, stated there would be an opportunity for the Bunbury Yacht Club to move to Casuarina Harbour, but there's no real money available for that. When the South of Perth Yacht Club was moved...
Mr Wilkie, can you just summarise now?
Yeah, thank you. They actually gave them the land for their building. In conclusion, Mr Mayor, I believe that The decision needs to be revisited. Good government's about recognising when incorrect decisions are made and rectifying them, and I believe council has an ideal opportunity to do this. If the bridge is put in at the lower height, you won't be able to fix it in the future, as was mentioned last night. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr Seymour.
Worship the Mayor, Honourable Adolforino and councillors. I'm here today representing the Bunbury boating community that have expressed to me their disappointment and lack of improvements for boating facilities and eliminating boating safety hazards, and to speak against the city's decision 254/16 dated July 2016. That was not to raise the height of the Lashnault Inlet footbridge. Previous City of Bunbury working parties in relation to the footbridge established that the height was a safety hazard and detailed in council minutes dated the 26th of 7th, 2017. Within these minutes, recommendations to raise the height of the footbridge was given. See item 4 in those minutes. In item 5 of these minutes states the Kambana Bay redevelopment funding was to incorporate the raising of the footbridge. The working parties consisted of Bunbury City councillors, Lashnault Inlet stakeholders, Marine Facilities Alliance and local businesses. The City of Bunbury decided against the raising of the footbridge because of the following issues. There would be an increase of size of watercraft, in the inlet. This is simply not true, and I don't believe it could happen. As Mr Wilkie's expressed, it's just a simple fact that the footbridge height isn't a factor. It's the size of the plug that will determine the size of the boat that'll come in. That feature just cannot be moved. The intention of raising the footbridge was always, and still is, to make safer access to the same size boats that use it now, limiting the damage to their lights, radio, safety equipment. It's a simple boating fact. The larger the boat, the wider the boat, the deeper the keel. The city has 3 boat ramps. 2 of these boat ramps require navigation under this footbridge. The other ramps in Casuarina Harbour are in very poor condition. No lights, no toilets, no disabled access. We understand there is moves to develop the facilities at Casuarina Harbour, but all indications are that these are 5 to 10 years away. Until other options are available, we, the boating community, demand that the safety aspect of this footbridge be addressed. Active and passive boating was another concern raised at the council meeting. The Bunbury Yacht Club formed a Safe Waters Committee and held meetings with the Bunbury Rowing Club, Bunbury Sea Scouts and the Department of Transport, and communicate regularly with each other to inform each other of coming events, of hazards that are in the area, and this communication works well even to today. And to my knowledge, there's never been a reported incident or a problem with passive and powerboat users in the inlet. The Bunbury Yacht Club has within its membership the Ocean Outrigger Paddlers, make sure I got that name right, incorporating additional 30 passive boating members that are housed in our club. We also were the house for the stand-up paddleboard business that the City Council granted licence on the northern side of the inlet. We actually had those people incorporated in our club. So this shows perfect use of power and passive communication and how we want to engage the whole community in this inlet. Environmental issues was another concern raised. One of the main contributors to the inlet water quality is the city itself, with its drains leaking into the inlet. A report from the Lashnault Inlet Master Plan states that many of the drains report into the inlet. We have reports from locals of the open drains that are in the area, and I'm sure the city will address these in due time. In recent media releases, when the water park was to be built on the northern side of the inlet, the water quality was deemed in very good condition. Local residents, we have signed letters from local residents that have raised the issue. Their property values will be drastically reduced if powerboating is reduced in the inlet. So that is a major concern for the city to consider. Local businesses have also raised concerns with us. Businesses in the city are struggling as it is, and we would like to encourage boat users to come to our city. We don't want them to come at low tide and not get back in. We don't want to have people come here and go, I'm not going to Bunbury because I can't use my boat. These are very, very important issues for the City of Bunbury on the tourism front. Inlet stakeholders. With the City recently extended the lease for 5 years for the Bunbury Powerboat Club, it has set the precedent for active boating to continue in the inlet. So raising the footbridge should also be a concern to the City to allow easier, safe access to all boaters.
Mr Seymour, can you summarise, or have you just finished?
I do thank the councillors for at least the opportunity to express our interests. We understand it's the 11th hour, and we respectfully hope that you'll reconsider. Thank you.
Mr Piacentini.
Thanks, Mr Mayor and councillors, for allowing me to have my input into this raising of the bridge. I'm looking at it from looking into the future rather than the past and what has been and everything that's been said I agree with. But I believe that we have an icon inlet there, which is the jewel in the crown, and we should be raising the bridge to allow more tourist boats to come in. And by raising the bridge to under the height of the road bridge, I believe we are not bringing in boats that will destroy the inlet, because at any given time now I've heard different arguments about we do training of children in canoes, we do all sorts of things in that inlet, and if we have boats in there, it's going to be dangerous. At any one time at the moment, there's 2 public boat ramps, so if there is training going on for people for children in canoes or whatever, it doesn't stop 300-400 boats dropping in off Stirling Street or off the Powerboat Club and spending all day in the inlet as long as they don't exceed 5 knots. So I think we should be opening this playground up to everybody and make it available to everyone. And given that the city, with what I've been doing and talking to the city about, tourism is a big focus. So are we going to cherry pick the tourism and say, yes, you can come to Bunbury, but you can't go there, you can only go here? I don't think that's what we're looking for. We want a solid, sound tourist business that everyone can benefit from. And if we can bring boats into the inlet in front of the CBD, people will get off and walk into town and spend money. Casuarina Drive is a different kettle of fish. You won't get as many people coming in there and then walking into town. You need people to be able to access and come into the inlet. Now, the height of the bridge will control the big boats, and the width of the floodgates will control large boats because their beam is wider. So I think we should be looking at this from all angles and to go forward, moving forward, raise this bridge to 1.4 metres and restrict the movement of boats to 5 knots. And I think we've got a great area there that we can enhance for tourism and everybody can enjoy the whole area. Thanks very much.
So, councillors, as advised today, there are 2 options from the executive. One is status quo, the other one is to look at this alternative. So, Councillor Kelly.
I'll move the original, Mr Mayor, on page 59.
Okay, we'll just show that one. Sure.
If this goes down, I'd like the opportunity. It's okay to move the alternative.
Thank you, Councillor McCleary. Is there a seconder? Okay, Councillor Kelly.
Also, sir, may I just ask that the alternative motion that I've put up also be considered?
I'm not aware of any your motion, Councillor Stick.
You should have it on your iPad, sir.
And can I flag my alternative, please?
Well, Councillor Kelly.
Mr Mayor, can I just ask a quick question as well?
A question?
Perhaps? Is that okay?
Sure.
With the officers? Thank you, I will. So just 2 quick questions, if I may. We've heard numbers of around 10,000 boat users in that area. I'm wondering if the officers are able to give us any indication on how many of those 10,000 vessels would find passing under the current bridge problematic. Do we know at all?
Oh, that's a toughie, but I'll ask. No, they're all pointing to each other. They don't know the answer to that.
No, Mr Mayor, I don't have that information.
No, Mr Harris? No, sorry, Councillor Hayward, we don't have that information.
Just one other quick question, if I may. Obviously, for us to consider either of these, or particularly the alternative, there's a significant amount of money required, and I'm wondering if there's been any discussions about any contributions from anybody other than the City Council.
Not at this stage, Councillor Hayward. That's, if the second recommendation is the one adopted tonight, then that'll be part of the discussions to look at sources of funding. Any further questions? Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, I'd like to speak for the rowing club, the dragon boaters, the paddle boarders, the small sailing craft, the Sea Scouts, the passive users of the inlet and the inlet itself. And I'd like to make the point that it's not about bigger boats, it's about more boats. And each of the speakers that spoke from the gallery spoke of more boats in the inlet. Now, every decision or every situation that requires a decision has multiple dimensions, and all of them must be considered, and we know that. And the key to making a good decision is listening to all sides. That's why we're here. And the issue to be discussed here tonight is about the contrasting interests. So in and around the inlet there are the boaties, there are supporters of passive recreation and people who simply like a peaceful landscape, and of course there's the environment of the inlet as well. And every stakeholder is free to present ideas and express opinions and identify risks or suggest changes, and that's happened, albeit quite late. So Council's being asked to make a decision, and the objective is to balance the interests of the different stakeholders, some of whom I've named in the passive recreation area, the rowing club, dragon boaters et al. I might add that the ocean goers said quite clearly in their email that they paddle out into the ocean. That's the whole idea of what they do. So I've looked at all of the facts and gathered as much information as possible, and possibly know a fair bit about the inlet through previous life to assess the options that we have. What I do know is that Council's decision ultimately must be compatible with competing values and interests, and we have competing values and interests that are going to be, put against each other as we contemplate more boats in the inlet. I might add the 300 or 400 boats that are claimed that are going to be coming off the Stirling Boat Ramp or the Powerboat Club simply wouldn't countenance that, because there just isn't enough parking, death by parking. So weighing up the probabilities or possible outcomes, the pros and cons, the opinions and feedback from people, I ask, whom does it serve? And in this case, I believe the right decision is the status quo. And I'll just digress as a cricket umpire, any doubt, not out. In this case, what we're being asked to do is contemplate more boats in an inlet against what is existing there quite harmoniously, as was pointed out by one of the speakers. More boats will upset the equilibrium. And finally, I find it's regrettable that the advice of our professional staff is at 1 minute to 12 being seen as being, if you like, flimsy, and compelled us to consider something at 1 minute to 12 when we've already been through this. I don't want to continue second-guessing professional staff by having items come in for me, about 4:30. So I'm asking councillors to support the executive recommendation. After all the careful work that we went through to get to this point, retain the equilibrium that is there at the moment, and vote for the executive recommendation on page 59. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Giles.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First of all, I'd just like to answer a few questions that were raised in some of the presentations. First of all, the letter from the BYC was actually distributed to Council before the meeting last year, before the July 2016 meeting. We had that letter before the meeting and it was considered, so it was in the consideration of that decision.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Yes.
The Councillor Giles is addressing the gallery.
Yeah, that's fair point of order. So, Councillor Giles, just through me. Thank you.
Yes, Mr Mayor, thank you. I'd also like to talk about the timing of the petition and the protest against this decision. The meetings of Council are not secret. We're being streamed. The minutes are on the website, the agendas are on the website. Anybody is free to have a look, to check, to ask questions. There was media reports about this, so I fail to see how anybody did not know that this was on the agenda in July 2016. I want to talk a little bit about safety, and I think that was answered in a couple of ways last night at the meeting. The boats, the captains of the boats need to ensure the safety of their vessel, and that's the way it is. It has always been that way. The height of the footbridge has been there for a long time, and that has people have managed to stay safe. We have other safety issues in our city that we need to address as well. We have footpaths that are unsafe, we have roads that are unsafe, we have areas where people want CCTV, where we have no money for that. Constantly we're trying to get extra things in the budget. I've constantly tried to get more footpaths in the area of Glen Iris, as I've said before. Carey Park, I'm sure, would like more footpaths, more lights, more CCTV. We can't afford that. So the safety of a few vessels, is that to be put above the safety of other ratepayers? I'd also like to talk about the representation, which we've had very strongly over the last few weeks. I have had representation from other groups, from other individuals who are Bunbury ratepayers, who do not see that they should be paying for this for a small group of people. Now, I know that sounds harsh, but in their eyes, that is what it is. The other ratepayers of Bunbury will have to pay for this. It's not coming out of anyone else's pocket, it's coming out of Bunbury, not coming out of my pocket, not coming out of the council's pocket, it's coming out of the council budget. And the ratepayers of Bunbury are entitled to have their say about how their money is spent. They do not want to, the majority of the people that I have spoken to do not want their ratepayers' money spent on the raising of the bridge at this 11th hour. So I urge you to consider this executive recommendation. Thank you.
Speaker against, Councillor Steck.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to clarify some considerations here, when it comes to the safety of vessels versus the safety of roads, the difference being when the road is unsafe, it is deemed a black spot and funding is available to fix it. This is the opportunity to fix the black spot for the boating fraternity. You won't get another chance. This is the time now. So I do not agree that we should sit with the status quo. Council often spends money in all areas of council. Sporting facilities, not everyone uses those. Arts and culture, not everyone goes to the art gallery. And, skate park, I don't go there, but many of the teenagers do, many parents do, and many young children do. So the valid argument to say, oh, this is just for a small group of people, is not fitting for the entirety of the business of council. Council has many facets to its business. The notion that more boats will use the facility, again, unfounded. No one can really state the truth of that. Environmentally, the environmental considerations have all been, answered. So there is no reason to say that by raising the bridge, there's going to be a catastrophe with the environmental matters. The other thing is the funding opportunities. We do have the money there. In my alternative motion, I have shown and set out an area as to where funds can be obtained from. We have, as last night, we were informed, we have $80,000 in accrued interest, plus we have funds from our infrastructure and assets funds, and plus we have reserves. We've already tapped into reserves before to give $60,000 to promoting the CBD. This goes hand in hand with that. We should be promoting the CBD as it is, and we are, as a city, have the luxury, and I say the luxury, of having users use the inlet, and they have done so for over 100 years. The rowing club and the boating club have been together for over 100 years in this city. This is historically the value and the aesthetics of this city. And we should retain that because we are the fun-loving city on the water. We are known as the Three Waters City, and Bunbury is an attractive place, and we should maintain that, not try to segregate small sections of the community. We should embrace the whole entirety of our community. So I'd urge councillors to make sure that you don't lose the opportunity because it's now. Not raising that footbridge is a fool's paradise.
Further speaker 4, Councillor Hayward.
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor. Look, I'm speaking for the motion, although I don't share all Councillor Kelly's views on those. I actually have no problems with more boats in the inlet, and I actually am supportive of the bridge being lifted. The reason I'm speaking against it tonight, the reason I'm speaking for the motion, is because we simply don't have the funds available to pay for the work to be complete. And I'm concerned, Mr Mayor, that we are giving false hope to the people who are in this room tonight that in some weeks' time that we'll be in a position to make a decision to spend $300,000 or $400,000 to be able to achieve this. And I don't believe, looking at our budget, that that is going to be something that we are able to do. I think, frankly, councillors, I think we need to be more honest and upfront with our constituents, and we need to say it is a missed opportunity. That's what it is. It is a frustration, and I share their frustration. I think that it should have been lifted. But I think to try to refix that problem at this point in our negotiations with the contract we have in place would be unwise, and I can't see that we have any ability to be able to fund the construction. So if we're not going to be able to fund it in September, why would we be putting off that decision? It should be made tonight. People should understand where they stand, and we should be able to get on with it. Having said that, into the future, I would be supportive of looking at it, whatever we could do to be able to revisit doing that into the future, and perhaps putting funds away in future budgets to be able to do so. But I know that we will not be able to make a decision based on the money that we have available in this September to be able to do this within the contract time. So we have an obligation, I believe, to get the work done, to provide that footbridge for the joggers and cyclists and others that are waiting for us to get that work complete, so that it can be part of connecting Kambana Bay through to our CBD, which is exactly what we set out to do. And I urge councillors to think about that, to think about whether we're just putting off the hard decision tonight, because we will not have the money to be able to fund this in September. Thank you.
Speaker against, Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, Mr Mayor, I urge you to vote against the motion before us now, and I do have an alternate motion to offer. That will read that we agree to reinstate the footbridge, former rail bridge, with a height increase of 600 millimetres. Number 2 is that the Bunbury Boating Fraternity contribute 10%, capped at $40,000 of the extra build cost. Now, I don't want to restate everything I said in 2016. We've been through that. We had a great meeting last night where a lot of facts were aired, in particular the environmental ones were put to bed. I agree with Councillor Hayward. I think we do need to make a decision tonight. We've been told right up until today, until 4:30, that this was an urgent matter and needed to be decided. And now we're confronted with an alternate motion that suggests that we can wait until September. I don't agree with that. I think we need to get on with it. We need to build for the future, and raising the height 600 millimetres will help cater for the predicted sea rise level of 0.9 of a metre by 2050. Raising the height will allow safer access at all times and protect vital communications and navigation equipment from damage. The height increase of only 600 millimetres, 2 feet for my demographic, will have little impact on the size of the boats that can access the inlet and not add significantly to the current population of watercraft. The fact is, of course, that we've got plenty of trailer boats that can go down and get into the inlet from there. So any increase in population may well come from trailer boats and not from seaborne vessels. Mr Mayor, councillors, I urge you to vote against this motion and support my alternate motion should it get an hearing. Thank you.
Further speaker 4. 4. Councillor Kelly to close.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Well, just to restate that there are several different interests on this inlet and that they need to be protected and looked after. I just want to clarify one point made by Councillor Cook, Mr Mayor, was that the environmental issues were put to bed. There is no evidence whatsoever that there has been a study on the amount of boats, the number of boats and the impact that they have on the inlet. If Councillor Cook would like to provide that report, I'd be very grateful to read it. The only valid argument here is that we have a conflict of interest between passive users and some people who would like to turn the inlet into a marina. And that is the bottom line. We need to support. Indeed, Mr Mayor, just looking at the Yacht Club's letter to say that they want to expand to the east and the west, it's on our, actually it's in our...
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Point of order, Councillor Cook.
Thank you. I consider the Deputy Mayor is introducing new argument in a rebuttal.
Oh, it's a fine line. Carry on, Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, the issue of this coming to us at 1 minute to 12 without the appropriate work, the fact that the inlet doesn't have any owner, if you like, it is an orphan, no management, and the fact is that we're wanting to make a decision to introduce more traffic on the inlet, upsetting a status quo that somebody had pointed out had gone on for 100 years when there are fewer boats, fewer motorboats, less fuel, etc. I think that we need to make a decision and stick by it. That decision is to leave it as it is. We also need in the future, as we work forward, to find out who is actually going to take responsibility for managing the inlet, because it sure ain't going to be the City of Bunbury. The state government, of course, they'll run a mile from that because they just can't deal with it. And ultimately, when we've got something on our doorstep that is worth something to people, it's of value to this city as an icon of the city, we can't afford to let it go. So I'm urging councillors to vote for the executive recommendation as it is, and let's get on with the job of putting this bridge back. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I'll put it all in favour. Those against? That's lost. Councillor McCleary. Yes, please.
The Council agrees in principle to consider raising the new Kumbana footbridge to either 600 mil or 1,400 mil from the original height, subject to the preparation of working drawings for raising the new pedestrian bridge 600 mil, 400 mil to be funded from the project contingency. Obtaining a price and timeline for LREX for raising the pedestrian bridge as per the working drawings. Directs the Chief Executive Officer to prepare a report for Council that details the costings, timeframes and funding sources for raising the footbridge, 600 mils or 1,400 mils, for final approval and endorsement of any required 2017-18 budget adjustment or on or before the 22nd of September 2017.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Steck. Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and you have to excuse my scribblings.
I can't see them, Councillor McCleary, so carry on.
Thank goodness. First off, I want to say that our city is a seaside city and we should embrace this. Tourism, by having a boat that can go under the bridge, so raising the height will encourage people to come through, not all at once, they won't all hit next week once the bridge is up, etc. But it gives people who are boaters the choice. It gives us a choice for 15 and 20 or 50 years' time, whatever that is going to bring, that Bunbury has embraced our waterside, being able to have the boats coming in and out. It also seems to be something that Bunbury does. We tend to limit ourselves through fear and change. We don't like change, we like the status quo. And it's a cheaper, safer way to go. And that's why Bunbury's why it is. How many times do we hear, Busselton? Why hasn't Busselton got it? Well, I'll tell you why, they take risks, okay? So those risks need to be taken by us, and calculated risks. So if you look at this particular recommendation that's up here now, this is a calculated risk. We will go and find out, if it's possible, what the costs are. I certainly wouldn't write a blank cheque for the bridge to be raised at this point in time, but I can see a way forward here. We have listened to our public. We are choosing to do something about it, and I would really encourage people to vote for this particular alternative motion. It's a responsible action, it is a short delay, and it will have an informed outcome, and that's what we've all been asking for. We've been asking our executives for this informed outcome. What if? They're saying, do that, and we'll tell you what the what ifs are. So please, do stand up and be counted and vote for this alternate motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Steck.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Whilst I don't share all the views with Councillor Haywood, I do believe that the money is there. I would prefer that we authorise the CEO to negotiate with ERTEC to construct the bridge and the drawings up to a specific amount of money, and if the project was going over that money, that the CEO would bring that back before Council for Council's consideration. However, having said that, I'm really happy that there is movement to raise the footbridge. I think it is a good decision, and I would encourage councillors to make sure that they go ahead and vote for this consideration. I again will reiterate, we don't need to be afraid of the funding because it is there, and we know it's there. Thank you.
Speaker against, Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, I urge you to vote against this alternate motion for the same reasons I stated before. I do have a motion which would allow the bridge to be raised by 600 millimetres and would allow a small contribution from the boating community. This motion before us does nothing. This is not agreeing to lift the bridge at all. This is sending the officers off to do work and come up with a final firmer figure. You know, we've been quoted 369,000, I think, to raise at 600 millimetres. Now, I believe that with contingency on contingency, that's probably still quite a high amount, and I doubt very much whether we'd be calling on the boating community to pay much more than $36,900. So, councillors, I'd urge you to vote against this, vote for my alternate motion, get on with the work, get the thing built. This just introduces a delay of 1 month. Thank you.
Speaker 4, Councillor Morris.
Mr Mayor, I'm at the age I like doing jigsaw puzzles. Taking the box and putting it out and just taking a look at all the different pieces, trying to take a look what the real picture is. Well, sometimes it's pretty difficult to put all the pieces together when you have a couple pieces on the floor. Now, last week I asked our officers if we had actually taken a look at the issue of the oceans rising, and they hadn't. And Mr. Mayor, you made the comment that, well, that might be irrelevant because Casuarina Harbour would be built. And you're absolutely right, absolutely right. Let me take a look at the two pieces that are on the floor. The Department of Bureau of Statistics and the census overestimated the population of Western Australia by 60,000. Now, we've read in the paper in relation to the outcome of that overestimation. $2 billion of GST is going to be disappearing in our budget, coming to WA. Now, I can tell you exactly, the state government, they haven't even come up with their first budget yet. They're going to be under pressure to find $2 billion in savings. There's a harbour out there that's not built yet. That could, in fact, be delayed enough in which, with the oceans rising, we're going to have boats in which we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars from Stirling Street and the boat ramp next to the Powerboat Club, hundreds of thousands of dollars in which might be useless because the boats may not be able to get under a bridge at its present level. So this is one reason why I love doing puzzles, putting all those pieces together. Because once you take a look at it, this is something we hadn't looked at before. Things change, and this is one of those things that changed. It changed my mind in relation to we need to raise that level of the bridge. Because if Casuarina Harbour is delayed or even knocked off the table, we need an alternative. And the alternative is we need to raise that bridge because we do have a duty of care. If those boats go out, there's a sea surge coming in, they can't get back in to safe harbor, what are those people going to do? Where are they going to find the safety? Safety is paramount. And this is one reason why I'd like to see the bridge raised. Thank you.
Speaker against? Councillor Steele, sorry.
Thank you. I'll be voting against this only because this gives the option to come back in a month's time and us to say no again about raising the bridge. I want this decision made tonight. Agreeing in principle doesn't mean our bridge is going to be raised in a month's time. What it means is we're going to come back with costings for the 600 and 1400 mil bridge. So I really want the bridge raised. I'll be voting against this alternative motion.
Okay, I'm going to enter the fray. I'm going to support this, and there's a few reasons. First of all, I just want to clarify before the media start writing stories. The current state government has committed $65 or $67 million to transforming Bunbury Waterfront. It is committed. So that's going to happen, Councillor Morris.
I hope so.
It will. It will happen. So a year ago, thereabouts, the City Council, us, made a decision to leave the bridge at that level, and obviously the opportunity was given to the boating public who used the inlet quite extensively once the bridge was removed to review, is there an opportunity for us to now go back and revisit the height of the bridge? And that's what's happened. There's been some very effective lobbying, but I do believe that goodwill has pervaded all of that. And last night, when we had the informal gathering, and a number of you were there were some very good points raised. And our officers made the point in their report that the estimated costs were plus or minus 50%, which is a significant amount. And like Councillor Steele, well, unlike Councillor Steele, I should say, I want to know precisely what the costs will be. I want to know what the design is, and I want to know what the costs are to that P90 level, to use the technology or the terminology, so that when I make a decision on behalf of this community that I represent, that I know fully what the costs will be, and I also want to know where that funding is coming from. So it's a complex issue. As you can see tonight, we've got probably two executive recommendations and two other notice of alternate motions to my right. So it's not a simple issue. So I believe that by finding the true costs, having those discussions with the good people in the room and elsewhere about how we can creatively and cleverly do something which the community can afford is the way to go. Let's get the facts that were challenged last night, quite properly challenged last night, and we'll present them back to Council to make an informed decision no later than the end of September. So I'm supporting this particular motion. So further speaker against. Councillor McCleary to close. That's pleasing. I'll put it all in favour of this particular motion. Those against? 2. That's carried. So that's the progress. That's where we're heading. Thank you very much, councillors. Thank you very much to everybody. I think we are done. We are. I declare this meeting closed at 6:33. Did you write me a note?
It's only if you needed to.
If I needed to.
It's only for the officer